$3,500, dual Xeon. Let's go ahead and build a workstation, shall we, Wendell?
We shall.
We've had several requests for a workstation build, and this one is in particular by request. So we've decided to build a dual Xeon workstation. The primary goal for this system is rendering, video editing, and maybe light 3D. Wendell, what's this going to be used for mainly?
A little bit of light 3D. It's actually mainly for a specialty application that's going to use one of those new Xeon Phi cards, but it's really close to an all-around, well-balanced workload workstation. It's not GPU heavy, it's not CPU heavy, it's all around.
So what we want to do for this video for you guys out there, if you're in the creative field, a photographer, videographer, an animator, you guys can use this video for tips, not necessarily building the exact same rig, but we'll walk through each step and then tell you if there's a better part maybe for your particular application. And you can always hop in the forum and say, like, I want to build a system like that, but I don't need 2 CPUs. I only need 1, but I need more graphics power. And we'll jump in and help you guys out. So let's go ahead and get started with this particular build. And let's start with the motherboard, shall we? We used the Z9PE-D8WS. It's a dual socket 2011 motherboard from Asus. Now, Wendell, go ahead.
It's a relatively compact motherboard, considering that it's dual socket, so you don't have to get a giant case. You can get a full tower case and be okay. It's got 8 slots, which is really awesome, so you could put 8 things in it, or 4 dual height video cards, or 4 otherwise dual height cards. It's got 4, if you use 4 of the PCI Express slots, they're all 16 lane, which is crazy. And this is on a very short list of motherboards that are specifically supported by Intel for the Xeon Phi. It's got a 4-port SSD accelerator on the motherboard, which is awesome. That's how I set it up with the storage. I don't know if we want to get into that now.
Yeah.
But it uses a 128 gig flash drive with a 3 terabyte disk drive. And the particular thing about this Marvell controller is that you can use the SSD as write back or write through caching, which means that if I've got a couple of gigabytes of stuff to copy, I can copy it at the write speed of the SSD, not the mechanical hard drive, and the controller will take care of archiving that to the mechanical controller when those files, aren't quite as quote-unquote hot anymore.
That is a very, very cool thing. And I mean, you can add so much to this with all those PCI Express lanes, and that's one of the main reasons. If you're doing business, it is always good to go socket 2011. If you're just gaming, a lot of times you can get a Z87 or even like an AMD 990FX or 970 or whatever, and you'll be just fine. But you're really going to enjoy those extra PCI Express lanes that you get with socket 2011. If you're expanding with multiple graphics cards, maybe another RAID card, but this one already has LSI on board, so it's pretty good to go. Now,
yes, the other thing I like is that this thing doesn't require error correcting memory. I mean, at this point, most memory, even that's not error correcting, actually does have some error correcting built in because of alpha decay. But this motherboard will support both registered ECC memory and non-ECC memory.
And you can get you can get a slight speed boost without the ECC.
Yes, and we may go to ECC memory later, but right now it's quote-unquote only 64 gigs of RAM, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, and you get 32 per CPU. Now,
right.
One option I wanted to give you guys here, if you guys do not need dual Xeon, you can get this. This is the P9X79 EWS or the X79 just WS. You go online, there's several different features. There's like the deluxe model of this. There's several different models, and they all have the same speed, just different connectivity. That's it. Connectivity. So this is the one I've got. It's the big guy. I'm going to be using it for my upcoming build, and I'm actually going to be using this with just not a Xeon, just a standard socket 2011 CPU. Oh no, I've dropped something in the floor. So my build will be coming up very soon as well. So you can check that out. All right, let's talk about the home. All good systems need a good home. So we've decided to use the Fractal Design Define R4, and I believe we use the Black Pearl edition, but you can get it in any color you want because it's all the same on the inside. Now, there are several different reasons why we've decided to use this case. Number one, it's decent when it comes to thermals, but it's really nice when it comes to the acoustics. It's very low noise. It's got some nice sound dampening material, bitumen foam on the door, on the side panel. There's foam beneath the front door, so it just really does a good job. But you want to make sure you have good cooling when you're using a sound dampened system like this. So they do have some of the Fractal Design Silent Series R2 fans. There's one in the front and there's one in the back for exhaust, making a kind of a wind tunnel in there. But
one in the bottom.
There's also one in the bottom blowing Is that an exhaust? That's blowing in, right?
It's sucking air in from the bottom.
So the one on the bottom is an intake. And then you'll have your power supply on the bottom as well, which is going to be blowing air out. So a lot of air is going to be moving around in this system. And as long as you have good cooling on your CPU and not a lot of overclocking, you'll be just fine. So let's talk about what you're using on the CPU to cool those Xeons. Unless there's anything else you want to add about the Define R4.
No, it's a pretty solid case.
Yeah, it's really good features. For the money, it's kind of ridiculous.
We'll probably have to put more fans in when we deck it out more, but it ran a little warm when the 780 was maxed out and the CPUs were maxed out, but if one or the other were maxed out, it was fine.
Now, if sound is of no concern and you really want cooling, you may want to think a little bit about a different case. And hop in the forum and we can recommend some other cases. This one is very good when it's, when you're talking about thermals and the acoustics, just, like the kind of, it's a good mix, a good compromise, but you can do better in each way. So, I found some cases that I almost ordered for myself because I really wanted low noise, but I won't be able to overclock as much. So I ended up ordering one of these for myself, and it's on its way here. So hope it gets here soon. I need to build my new system. All right, for the CPU, using two of the Noctua NH-U12S, and these have 120 millimeter fans on them. They're tower cooling units, and they're extremely quiet. They've got the high quality Noctua fans on there. Wendell, did you have any problem with these when you were installing at all or anything like that?
Nope, it went basically according to plan. It was pretty easy. They weren't in the way of the RAM or anything, and you've got to look at this motherboard. Everything is really crammed in there to get two sockets on a motherboard this small.
Now, the Noctua fans are expensive, but you get what you pay for. They're extremely quiet for, all fans make noise. That's something that a lot of people like. They think that if they spend more money, they can get a completely silent fan. These are pretty much whisper quiet. You can hear them when you're running at 100% CPU or whatever, but they do throttle up a little bit. But they're extremely quiet, high quality. They're going to last a long time. So, grab a Noctua. All right, the CPUs, the exact model number. We're using the Intel Xeon processor. The E5 processor family is what we went with. Wendell, I'll let you go ahead and take it away and tell them about the Xeon that you're using for this.
It's a Xeon E5 2630. Now, this is a Sandy Bridge part, Sandy Bridge E, but it's really nice because Ivy Bridge E just came out, and you can kind of find these on fire sale. And so, like, MSRP, as of this video, is about $600 for these, but if you shop around, you can find them for $400 or $500.
You can definitely grab these for $500, and especially in the next coming months, as like we come into the holiday season and stuff, you'll start seeing people trying to get rid of these. Grab them because they're going to be extremely fast, and the price to performance ratio, you may do a little bit better with Ivy Bridge E, but it's going to cost you a lot more for 2% more performance. Now,
the thing with these that sold me on the cost of benefit equation is that they're 2.3 stock, which is a little slow, but they turbo boost to 2.8.
That's a pretty good turbo for this.
There's a feature on the Asus motherboard that lets you run these in turbo all the time. So I turned that on, and I ran it for 4 days, and it didn't crash or do anything weird, and it was fine with these Noctua coolers. So the CPUs in this machine run at 2.8 all the time, and it's rock solid.
So that's all you need to do. If you're, if you're in a productivity environment, you may not even need to overclock. You could probably even get a little bit more out of this, but you don't need to really. Just run them at 2.8 all the time and pay your
This
power
type
bill.
of machine, I wouldn't really want to overclock this type of machine because that's introducing, too much instability. But considering that they're designed to turbo to 2.8, it's not really exactly overclocking. It's just an Intel figured that you wouldn't be able to deal with the thermals. And it's like, oh, no, you can.
Yep, with the Noctua fans, you're just fine. For the memory now, we have 64 gigabytes of 1600 megahertz Kingston Beast, the Kingston HyperX Beast memory. We use this memory a lot. It had been rock solid and stable. I have zero complaints with this. I have never had a stick fail. I've had like 90 sticks. I've used so many of these. So we've used a lot of these.
Registered ECC RAM is also compatible with this motherboard, and most people building something like this would go with registered ECC, but the particulars of this build and our particular application, it wasn't necessary.
Mm-hmm. And especially if you're building something that's also going to double as a work and gaming rig, which I know a lot of you guys out there are going to do, because let's face it, a lot of us get our stuff done and then we play games all night. You may want to look at this type of RAM. So that's why we went with that. Also, 1600 megahertz memory with a low cache latency is going to give you almost as much memory throughput as faster memory with worse timings.
Now let's talk for a second about the motherboard in this case. Strictly speaking, I don't think this motherboard is designed for this case, or at least this particular form factor. And the reason I say that is because there were two holes in the motherboard that didn't line up with anything on the case. And so in the video, you can see me struggle with that a little bit. But what I did was I turned the standoffs upside down and put another standoff on the side so that there would at least be a standoff on the motherboard to prevent it from touching the case, but it's not actually mounted to the case. But that's only 2 of the standoffs on the motherboard, and there were like 9 others.
And it should be secure otherwise. I mean, this is kind of an unorthodox thing to do. But if you are going to be using the P9X79E Deluxe, that one is SSI CEB, and that does have the same mounting holes as standard ATX. It's just a few millimeters wider, that's all. Like just maybe a centimeter or 2 wider, just a tiny bit wider. But that'll fit just fine in the Define R4. So if you're only doing single CPU, you'll be just fine. And if you're getting like a P9X79 Deluxe, I believe those are just ATX, so those are just fine. All right, moving on, let's talk about the storage that we're going to be using this. Or should we talk about the graphics card next? What do you think?
Well, we can just mention the graphics card because we ran a bunch of tests with the workload. And
yeah, I think I actually have that graphics card. Just happens to be laying on the floor here. Let me go ahead and get it off the floor. All right, here we go. Asus. It's the GeForce GTX 780 Direct CU2, the overclocked edition. And now this GPU has their Direct CU2 cooling unit on it. And you guys can check out our video. We did a video overview of that. Now, one thing that's nice about this is they've used 10 millimeter diameter heat pipes, and that's allowed them to shrink this to a dual slot card. Before it was a triple slot card, so it was taking up a lot of space. So this one's a lot better, nice and quiet, and it's going to keep your system, it's going to keep the GPU cool and allow you to do some overclocking. But this is going to be, number one, amazing for gaming. But number two, it also is going to be just really good for CUDA. And like you just said, you price to performance versus the Quadro. It's almost ridiculous. It's almost as fast as a Quadro, not quite, but the Quadro is like way more expensive.
It turns out that there's a BIOS hack that you can do, and it becomes as fast as the low-end Quadro. And if what you're doing doesn't require a lot of video RAM, which what we're doing doesn't, it's a hell of a good deal.
If you are someone who, if you need a Quadro, you know you need a Quadro. So don't bother to jump in the comments and say, I can't believe you guys used a gaming graphics card. Because I see that all the time. People are like, I'm using a Quadro because I'm better than you. Like, listen, guys, we know a Quadro is faster, and we know there's applications that really, really need a Quadro. But
I would rather see an OpenCL solution, there needs to be better OpenCL support on PC for the applications that they're running, because honestly an AMD card in this would have been better. Yeah,
7970 is amazingly fast, especially because this system's going to be running Adobe Premiere a lot, but it's also going to be running After Effects, and right now there's not any support in After Effects for OpenCL, so that's the real deciding factor. We had to use CUDA for that. CUDA is also supported by Adobe Premiere, but OpenCL is a bit faster. So the 7970 would have been an amazing card, both for gaming and for OpenCL. But this is a little faster for gaming even.
Not all After Effects can be GPU accelerated. And in this case, with the plugins and settings and workflow that they have, a lot of it was CPU bound. So that's why we went with a dual CPU instead of like a FireGL or a dual FireGL type graphics configuration. Yeah,
bottom line is jump into the forum and tell us exactly what you're doing, and we will be able to give you the exact parts that you need. We'll send you the links to them. So again, just check the description. We have the link to this article, and you guys can talk about it there. Now, for the storage, let's talk about what we've done here for the storage. We have Samsung 256 gigabyte SSDs, and we have 2 of those. All right, Wendell, how'd you set those up?
One, the 256 is a boot drive, an operating system drive where all the programs are installed. The second one is installed with the mechanical hard drive on the Marvell controller. Now, there are 4 ports that are part of the SSD caching setup on this motherboard. The Marvell controller can use the SSD to accelerate the mechanical hard drive. But what makes the acceleration different here is you can choose if you want the frequently used files to be mirrored from the hard drive to the SSD, or if you want the frequently used files to just be stored on the SSD altogether. The difference is that for writes, the writes will happen on frequently used files directly to the SSD versus writing versus other configurations on other motherboards where when you write a file, it's writing it to the mechanical hard drive and only reads are accelerated through the SSD. This motherboard will let you accelerate writes through the SSD, which is what we wanted.
There are other options. This one is inexpensive, and probably is going to be your best price to performance ratio yet again in this category at that price.
Now, the new Mac Pros are not out yet as of this video, but when they come out, I want to put the new Mac Pro that's 12 cores toe-to-toe with this thing, because I bet this thing will stomp it.
It probably will in the same applications.
The Mac Pro has the Fire GL. It has 2 Fire GL cards, I guess, the new one. Mm-hmm. And so I might need to throw in another video card in this, but still, even if we do that, the total cost of this machine would be like $4,000. And I'm pretty sure the 12-core Mac Pro is going to be like $12,000.
Yeah, it'd be a $12,000 garbage can, the most expensive garbage can ever. But hey, for the standard mechanical hard drive, we have a Seagate Barracuda XT, 3 terabytes, 7,200 RPM drive with 64 megabytes of cache. So there you have it, one of those. And again, we already talked about how we're going to be using one of the SSDs from Samsung to do all of the caching as well. So that'll be nice. Now we need some power for this system, and we need a lot of power because we have 2 CPUs, and that's going to drink a lot of power. We also have a massive graphics card, and we want to be able to add some things later. Now, Fractal does make a really nice power supply. It's the Newton 1000 watt power supply, but we needed a little bit more than that. So we decided to go with the Corsair AX 1200i, and this one's really nice. Also, I want to mention that Corsair just came out with their RM series as well, so those are very good power supplies as well. But if you want to get like a little lower, you guys can check out my video on this RM850. So this is all, I'll be using this one a lot. This is nice and quiet, and it's also gold certified. And for the price, those are very, very good. They're a lot less expensive than the AX series, but the AX series is quite premium. This is 80 plus platinum certified, and that's very important when you're building a workstation. You want to make sure that all of your components are getting good, clean power. You want to make sure that there's not going to be any weird spikes or anything like that, or dirty power essentially that can degrade the components over time or even just kill them randomly. So you want to make sure that you get a good power supply, and this is pretty much the best 1200 watt power supply out there. Platinum certified is the way to go. Also, this does have the Corsair Link, and the way that works is that you plug it in, and then you can monitor the temperature, the fan speed right inside your OS. And this works with a lot of different Corsair programs or Corsair products out there. So if you've purchased a Corsair product in the last few years, like an H100i or something like that, pretty much anything with the lowercase I at the end of it, I'm pretty sure that's how that works. Most of those products work with the Corsair Link. This, if your system is running at low system load, the fan will just stay off completely. I mean, just completely runs off, 0 decibels. It's crazy, and the fan doesn't move. But with this system, it's going to be moving. It's probably going to be moving, so it'll be generating 20 to 30 decibels of sound, which is a little bit louder than a whisper. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the issues that we had with this build.
The issues that we had, the main one was even with the Corsair AX 1200i, the power cable was almost not long enough. If it was just an inch longer, it would have been perfect. Now, the 24-pin connector at the very top is at the very top of the motherboard, and with the power supply in the very bottom, it was difficult with this power supply to route that cable. That was a real bummer.
Well, this is unique because this motherboard has a different layout than most motherboards on the market. If you get one of the standard motherboards, it'll be a little bit easier, but it still could be a little bit longer.
I did get it routed behind the motherboard finally. The specifications, like the manual from Corsair, says that it'll be from a certain length to a certain length, and the one that I happened to get was on the longer end of that range. And so if you happen to get one on the shorter end of the range, there's no way it would work. And it was like a 10 millimeter range or a 20 millimeter range, something like that. It's like, oh wow, that was close.
So do keep that in mind when you're grabbing this motherboard and that power supply. Also, the graphics card. In the first slot on this machine, this one the graphics card has a backplate. I mean, you can get a graphics card without a backplate, and it'll probably work just fine. But because of the backplate on the GeForce GTX 780 Direct CU2, it hits the audio ports, and you have to move it down. You can't. I mean, you can. I guess you could wedge it in there, but it would be kind of weird having that metal on metal, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And I would not recommend it. It could short something out. I mean, who knows? It might work for a little while, but I would not trust that.
Yeah, the front panel connector, I even tried bending it a little to get it out of the way, and I just wasn't comfortable doing that, so I just moved it down a slot. It'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, all these slots are 16 speed, if you're using a different motherboard like this one, and you're only using one graphics card. I mean, all these slots are going to be 16 if you're just running one graphics card, but if you're running multiple graphics cards, this one, it should be fine, but it's going to be a little bit close to. I need to test this one out in there and just see how it works out. Hope it's not a big deal.
There was actually plenty of room. If the notch on that back plate had just been cut out a half an inch more, it would have been fine. And it was totally just a mechanical thing. There wasn't actually any components in the way. If I were feeling adventurous and it wouldn't void the warranty, I'd pop the back plate off, go down to the mill, and just mill out a little slot there for it, and it would have been fine.
The one thing the backplate does really is it adds rigidity to this card because it's big and it's heavy.
If I didn't need the extra 200 watts, I think a fractal power supply probably would have been a better choice.
Yeah, but you really need those extra 100 watts. So I'll put the link for the fractal power supply in this video as well. And if you don't need the extra wattage, you'll be just fine. I mean, how many watts was this drawing? It wasn't even drawing 1,000 at this point, was it? But you may need
no, not even. No, not even with these CPUs. These CPUs are only 95 watt TDP. But with two 780s and two Xeon Phi cards, it's going to be a different story.
Yeah, so if you're not going to be running two 780s and two Xeon Phis, you will be just fine with the fractal power supply. And we'll give you guys a link to that in the description. So there'll be links to all this stuff. And again, you guys can always hop into the forum and ask some questions. So let us know exactly what you guys are building and we'll help you guys out. But remember, when you guys are posting build questions, a lot of you guys post a list of stuff in the forum and you say like, hey, I'm going to build this. And then you say like, is this a good system? I do not know if it's a good system or not because I don't know what you want to do with it. So be sure that whenever you post a list of specs or whenever if you're looking at a video like this and you say, hey, I need a system to do something similar to what they're talking about, let us know exactly what you're doing so we can recommend exactly the right components. It's going to be a little bit different for everybody. Different flavors, man. It's cool like that. Stay tuned for my build video coming up. And we also have the Kill Your Console video. If you're someone who's thinking about a next-gen console, don't. Just watch our Kill Your Console for the reasons why not to get a new console and also some options on what to build. If you're just building an inexpensive console replacement rig or just an inexpensive gaming rig. PC gaming is where it's at. And PC productivity is where it's at as well. Not on Apple. Sorry, guys. Apple is for, what is Apple for? Coffee shops?
Apple is not for getting work done.
Apple's an accessory these days. Apple is a fashion accessory. Though it's becoming tacky like velour.
Well, I mean, Ivy Bridge E is out. Where's the new Mac Pro?
Yeah. All right, guys. Again, questions, forum, and subscribe. I love you. That was awkward. Bye. All right, that'll do.